Hey guys, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. How you doing? Are you good? Good. Like all four of you are doing awesome. Good. Good. All right. Well, my name is Adam Crowell. I do work here at the church that's hosting this space, but I'm actually just hosting it on my own. They're just letting us use the building. And there's a number of reasons why I wanted to host this event, which I want to kind of introduce to you as a part of queuing up the film. But before I do that, I do want to give you just a few kind of ground rules for the space and building that we have here. This is a church building. It's used all week long to try and be a benefit to the community it's in. We try and partner with Department of Human Services and foster care and a number of other organizations. So we want to respect this building and leave it as good as we found it, right? But we also want to respect the people to our left and our right. So I think that it would be amazing if we had some even disagreeing opinions during some of the Q&A afterwards and all the rest. This isn't supposed to be a red meat, rah-rah Jordan event necessarily. I think we should have some different opinions about Jordan by the end of this film, I'm hoping. But anyway, I like to say we want disagreement, but we don't necessarily want disruption, right? So if there is disruption, we will ask folks to leave at that point, and that's just another thing that we want to do with respecting our neighbor to our left and our right. Sound good? Awesome. Good deal. All right. So why did I want to do this film? Why did I want to host this gathering? Well, it seems like in culture we're further and further fractionating from one another. We have this digital-infused tribalism that's kind of dividing us against one another, we might say. We tend to, I think, we were on this nice trend and pace to view each other as a common humanity, but more and more and more it seems like we view each other as a common enemy, right? We view people as either or us and them. There's kind of black and white thinking about the people that are sitting to our left and right, and I can't stand that. And so I wanted to try and create spaces where we could gather and collect people that disagree on so many things. So I was talking with someone who distributed so many of the posters that we have, right? And he was on the phone with me, and he said, wait a second, so you work for a church? And I said, yeah. He goes, so does that mean you're a pastor? And I said, yes. And he goes, oh, man, I don't know the last time I talked to a pastor, man. This is weird. Okay. Well, we probably disagree about a lot, right? It's like, yeah, we probably disagree about a lot. He goes, but we're working together on this thing, right? I said, yeah. So we probably agree on a little bit, right? He goes, yeah, this is cool. It's like, we should do this more often. Exactly. You should come to the show, continue to distribute. So that's the idea, right? We want to gather people, collect people around tables and in rooms that have different opinions, different outlooks on life to try and get after what is the meaning of life, try and get after these deeper truths, not these silly, trivial, tribal things that divide us, right? And so I want to have a good and heartfelt dialogue after this. That's why I'm so thankful that the filmmakers are here to help facilitate the Q&A. You can ask them any question you have from the film, also just all sorts of questions. These people have been living in Canada in the middle of so much of what you're going to watch right now. And so anyway, I'm excited that you're here, and I want to say thank you. Thank you for not just coming to watch a movie about Jordan Peterson. You could buy this thing on iTunes later this month, right? But you're coming to a conversation and a dialogue. So thank you for contributing to that, all right? So, with that said, let's enjoy the film. I'd love for you to, not just clap for the film, but also tell its creators how much you loved it. So could I invite up Patricia and Matt as the film producer and directors? Well, we wanted to open up with a little bit of Q&A and let you guys ask them some questions. They not only made this film, you guys have really been living in every one of those scenes and much, much more, obviously. So, I'm sure you guys have plenty of questions about the film and maybe things in between scenes that we didn't get to see as well. So, I'd love to open that up to you, but before I do that, I have a couple questions for you guys. So, one reason that I wanted to do this gathering, I mentioned some of that at the beginning. I wanted to create spaces and create environments where we can gather people of differences, people of different opinions, and we can talk and dialogue and maybe learn from one another and benefit one another in that process. And that's a big reason why we opened up this building in this way tonight. And so what's so cool is that I've been talking about this and rambling about it in all of my writing and my studying that I'm doing. And my wife, the other day, she read so much of your guys' company and your motto and your identity statement that I believe you wrote, Patricia. And she was like, this is like the beautiful version of all the things you keep scrambling about, man. So I would love for you to tell us a bit about Holding Space Films. What is it all about? Where does the name come from? What are you guys up to? So.
I love so much that resonates with you. So Holding Space Films, where that comes from is this term holding space. A few years ago, I didn't know what it meant, and I was participating in facilitation groups. One in particular was a group in Vancouver that brings together Israeli, Palestinian, and Canadian youth to make films together and participate in dialogue programs. And something that I was being told there and in other places was that I was good at holding space, and I had no idea what this meant. And I've come to learn that it's about a particular way of listening. It's like the conversation. If you think of a conversation you've had with someone where you really feel like you're being heard and understood, and someone isn't just listening to the words that you're saying, but they're there with you and experiencing the emotion and kind of walking through an experience with you. And when people started bringing this up to me, it just made me really appreciate how important that kind of deep listening is. And I came to find that it's something that's very important in our process of filmmaking, of really enabling people to be their authentic selves and to know that they could just be really honest, and so that we can showcase that on film.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Well, let's ask this question, because I'm sure it'll come up. How did you guys get connected to Jordan in the first place? How did you get connected to this whole process?
So I've known about Jordan's work for probably 15 years, back when I was a psychology undergrad many, many years ago. I didn't study at U of T, I studied at a different university, but I came across his book, Maps of Meaning, and I found it incredibly fascinating. In particular, in his introduction, he talks about having these nightmares about the end of the world, and how it was so important for him to delve into understanding the nature of evil. And I found that, as well as many other aspects of his book, really, really interesting. And then I came to learn that at the University of Toronto, he was a life-changing professor for many students. They would line up after class just hoping to have their 5 minutes with him to ask a question. So I had an idea at the back of my mind to make a film about him for many years, and I finally approached him in 2015. And this was a year and a half before he released the videos that then propelled him onto the world stage. So I guess the rest is history.
That's great. Well, I really do want to open up for some Q&A with you guys, for you guys to be able to ask some questions. A couple of notes real quick. The way we'll do it is just raise your hand and we'll kind of call on you, and we have someone running around with a handheld mic. And we have that because this is being recorded, this Q&A. And so we want to hear from you in person, but we also want to show everyone else the conversation that we're having. And so if you're uncomfortable with that in any way, shape, or form, you can ask your question in the lobby. Patricia and Maz will be hanging out for a while after, and you can grab them then. But kind of to warm you guys up and get you comfortable with talking, I want to ask a question, and you can kind of just shout out your answer. That's more than fine. But a big part of what I've been studying and trying to work through is trying to figure out where are these different tensions within culture. And Jordan has been a lightning rod for tension in culture, as you can tell from the film, and as many of you already know, obviously. And so as far as you can tell, and maybe that's why you started following Jordan in the first place, what do you think is your biggest concern about attention in culture right now? Go ahead and just say something, anybody. Polarization? Good. Hey, free speech? Just this idea, right? An inability to listen to someone. That's wonderful. Behind you, sorry. One more time. Nationalism? Yeah. Its own identitarian issue, right? Yeah, we're losing our connection, right? Yeah, there seems like no, and we have faux versions of connection through all this digital media, right? No, but they're tied hand in hand. Yeah, and thank you for bringing the youngest viewer here. That's wonderful. Thank you. There was one more time.
Party politics.
Pardon politics, yeah. Sorry, was there one over here? This is good. Yeah.
Yeah, the digital tribalism.
Yes, digital tribalism. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a tragedy, honestly. Yeah, we dehumanize each other so quickly when we don't have eyeballs and human beings we're talking with, right? Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, hopefully that warmed you guys up a bit. Let's ask some questions with Patricia and Maz here. Like I said, they were the creators and the minds behind this film, the dynamic duo, the most creative Nazis you've ever seen, because a woman business owner and an immigrant, how do you guys do it, you know? Man, so... Yeah. Well, let's ask some questions here real quick. Steven has a microphone. Just raise your hand and we'll call on you. Over here, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a long walk. It better be good.
I know. Well, the first question I have, it's rather quite non-polarizing. It's because he talked about diet and his depression. And is there anywhere that he has this diet and him and his daughter got into that talks about the foods that cause depression or anything like that? Does he have that documented anywhere, or is it documented anywhere that people could look and find and see?
His daughter, Michaela Peterson, does. If you look up the lion diet or the carnivore diet, you'll find more information about it. But it's essentially beef, salt, and water. That's all they eat.
And her site is called Don't Eat That. So you can find all her research and commentary on there.
It's on Michaela's website. It's called don'teatthat.com, I believe. Yeah.
And I presume like everyone here is on social media. Michaela's posting about it all the time if you follow her, and you can link off of a lot of things from there too. So.
I'm just curious if he's seen it, and if so, if you've gotten feedback from him on it.
So we showed Jordan, Tammy, and his mom the film back in August. Yeah, it was a bit bittersweet because it had to be at the hospital. Tammy was bedside. Because we were doing the sound mix and the color correction and everything, and spent all this time with the post-production. But it ended up being a MacBook that we had to wheel in on a cart with no speakers. Yeah, it was intense. Well, so the way it works is that you finish the film, you picture lock it. That means the editing is done and it's completely finished, and then you can show it to the people that are in it. So that's key for that kind of journalistic integrity. But yeah, it was. We were nervous. I mean, these guys had opened up their door since 2015. And this is it, So we saw the film together. Well, really, kind of like how we were doing back here. We like to watch. We've seen the film like 80,000 times. And so we just kind of watch Jordan and Tammy and Bev watch the film. And yeah, they said they really respected the film. Felt it was an honest film. And Jordan later on said that it's kind of hard for him to see the film as a film because he's in it. And his life has been so fast and so much stuff has happened. Like every week, like back then, 2016, early 2017, like every week there was a new scandal. So he had forgotten so much of what happened, and it's kind of stressful for him. So to kind of relive it, and then all the old footage, like from 2015, when he looks so different, the personality test, and we wanted to kind of start the film that way as kind of like this promise, like you guys are going to see something that you've never seen before. This isn't a YouTube documentary. This isn't chopping things up that are already out there. So I think that was I think that must have been a big trip for Jordan to see all of that stuff that he'd probably forgotten about. Yeah, so it was a very interesting night that, I think he needs to take some time and maybe watch it again and watch it with other people to kind of make sense of it all. but they did really respect the film. Yeah.
Can you guys speak to, there's been plenty of articles that have come out about the film already, but one thing that often comes up is this word balance, but you guys have kind of not pushed back against that, but maybe clarified that a little bit. Could you add to that?
So one of the most common pieces of feedback we get is that this film is balanced. And yeah, we're kind of resistant to that because, I mean, the film focuses on Jordan. It's not like it's an equal balance between Jordan and opposing sides, and we weren't, measuring how many minutes are pro and how many minutes were anti. That wasn't really our intention. But our intention was to, I guess, going back to this idea of the deep listening, my experience of going through the process of witnessing all of this over the last 4 years was a bit of a roller coaster of, listening to something Jordan is saying and hearing points that I think he's making that are really important and often being misunderstood, but then going and deeply listening to Lane, who, was otherwise just portrayed as an SJW that's irrational, going to these protests, and, no one's actually taking that time to, really listen to where someone like Lane is coming from. So I thought it was important to really show what's it like when we listen to all of these people and give them their dignity, and kind of take you on a bit of that roller coaster that I felt like I was on throughout these 4 years. So I think as a result of that, it comes out in this way that people feel is balanced.
Yeah, and I'd kind of add to that and say, when people say that, it kind of, we didn't do that so people can say that. We did that because that's what it was like. To do it the way we did it, we felt was the closest to reality and what it was like being around and hearing what people had to say, and then being able to give more of a whole picture of that time period.
And I actually had a question.
Yeah.
So you guys have seen a lot of the backstory behind Jordan when he's not in a pressure cooker. Can you speak to his character? I think a lot of when I'm trying to evaluate a teacher and the truth that they're communicating is what does their life look like? So what do you see behind the scenes?
I would say that a lot of your favorite YouTubers and personalities and journalists and people online, a lot of them have a show persona. And as we've been going on this tour and meeting people that are hosting us, and they know some of these people, and they say, yeah, it's like night and day, The thing about it is that partisanship pays. You can make a lot of money by picking a tribe and just feeding in exactly what they want. And sometimes when you meet these people, they're behind the scenes. They're not really that right wing, or they're not really that left wing. They're just kind of doing what the algorithms want them to do, because that's what gets money. That's what gets clicks. I compare all these people to somebody like Jordan. Jordan is how he is in those videos is kind of how he is in private. He's intense. And he listens intensely. He's looking at you when you're talking to him, and he's trying to figure out what you're saying. He's also very, because people ask us this, and we want to be, because we've been behind the scenes, we want to be useful, because I know you guys want to hear those little anecdote stories, because that's what I would want if I were you. So yeah, Jordan is a pretty open-minded guy. Likes to hear a good story, likes to tell a good story. I find him kind of, he's a bit of a xenophile, that comes with liking a guy like Jung, some more, I don't know, mainstream, or I don't know how much Jung is accepted in mainstream psychology, but Jung has that almost artistic kind of quality to his work, and I think Jordan responds to that. Jordan almost became a lawyer, but he's too open-minded to be a lawyer, I think. So yeah, I mean, we've read tarot cards, drank Quebecois beer. This is years ago when we first met him. Yeah, he's a very intense guy, and he never likes to say something or be part of something that he's not fully into and but he does like to talk out loud in public and try to figure something out in public. So I really kind of like Sam Harris does that too. So yeah, I would say he's a lot like what you see in the videos, thankfully.
There's a couple over here, I believe. Oh, and let's start here and then we'll work over.
A couple of things that I picked up right near the end. A couple of different words: story and truth. And my question is, whether you're left, right, in the middle, center left, center right, doesn't every group believe that they're speaking truth? So whose truth are you going to follow? And then when we talked about the story, same thing. There's a lot today about a story. Everybody has a story, and that everybody's trying to convince the other person that their story is superior to somebody else's story. Isn't that what Jordan's doing?
Yeah, and you guys have that like powerful quote in there about like the best story wins, etc. So maybe, I'm sure you've heard plenty about that.
Jordan is very talented at many things, and I think ultimately he's a storyteller, and that's part of why so many people gravitate to him. And one of the reasons why we ended the film that way is because of that, and also because I think it explains his motivations and goals and his larger ideals of what he's trying to accomplish very well. He knows that we all need a story to believe in order to stay motivated, to be focused, and to move through the world. And he sees the dangers of people falling into these really ideological stories. So he's trying to tell a different story that allows people to dig into bettering themselves while also believing in something larger. I don't know if I'm answering your question, though. There were a lot of things in that.
I think as you were speaking, I started thinking about, is the ideologues only know their own story? So their story is going to be, again, speaking to people that remind them of themselves, and that's fine. That's partisanship, and again, it pays. But the best stories are the ones that are told of the traveler, that can go to different tribes, physically, metaphorically, and be able to pick up different accents and learning different dances, and being able to kind of come back and tell your story in a more sophisticated way. So what I'm trying to say with that, I guess, politically might be that you can't really be a person on either wing if you don't know or experience the other side. You can't know how good the West is if you don't know the East, and vice versa. So, yeah, traveling and experiencing that which challenges you and makes you uncomfortable sometimes only will toughen you up. And not everybody can do that, because the thing about ideology, it keeps you pretty safe, keeps your world maintained, expected, and doesn't challenge you at all. But the better stories are the ones that do.
They do, and I think it was important for us to just show a lot of complexity in this film, because what we could see when we were reading media articles and talking to people about this issue and about Jordan Peterson was just a lot of righteous opinions about, well, this is the truth about, I think, we even recently got a kind of film review, if you could even call it that, called New Documentary Reveals the Truth About Jordan Peterson, and it was like cherry picking 3 parts of the film that just affirmed what this person clearly already believed about Jordan. So the other thing I want to add about linking these ideas of truth and story was we had these sort of chapters in the film where we had different quotes that journalists and authors wrote about Jordan, because everyone was playing their part in creating the myth and the persona of Jordan Peterson. That's part of why we depicted him in the poster in this way. There's scaffolding on his shoulders, because everyone was kind of co-creating this persona of who he is. But then towards the end of the film, we see, well, he's still kind of trying to figure out who he is in the midst of this tumultuous period of his life.
Yeah, and that's a deep question, and I hope this doesn't get too complex because it's more helpful with a visual, but there's an idea that I've learned from someone across the river, Rick McKinley. He was teaching us about this idea that people tend to identify for the safety and for the personal security with different tribes and groups, right? And so you might say that, you might conceptualize that and think of it, try and visualize it as different peaks. And so you have the NRA peak, and you have the right conservative peak, or the religious right peak, and then you have the Planned Parenthood peak, and on and on and on you go of these different peaks that people are tents, you might say, that they're within. And that tent has its own language, and that's part of the traveler idea. You got a little Jungian there for a second. But that's like the traveler idea, right? Is a person who can speak more of those languages than just the one that's in that tent. But here's the catch. If you try and speak a language outside of that tent, you are like church disciplined out. You are kicked out of that tent, right? And one thing I do feel like, and I've seen happen with Jordan, is that instead of playing around in those little tents, he goes down beneath the surface, and then you start thinking about it, oh, those are just peaks on an iceberg, right? He's going down below the surface oftentimes and getting at the root concerns, questions, and ideas that humanity has in so many ways. And so he's wrestling with those, and that is why you get this interesting mix of people that are like fascinated, either frustratingly, but oftentimes in the admiration way. It's such a unique mix of people. And I have seen that cash out in people considering religion again, even though like Jordan's not being proselytizing or anything like that, but all of a sudden people come back towards asking questions about faith that they used to have or whatever that might be. And that's because he is digging at those deep existential questions about existence. Let's swing over here real quick and we'll come right back. So, go ahead, you two.
Kind of along the lines of story, as filmmakers, you also tell a story. So now you're kind of embedded in part of the narrative now of Jordan Peterson. And I was curious about what that process looked like as you chose clips and interviewees and and quotes. I was just curious, what was your process of maybe self-reflection about maybe your own biases and maybe your own perspectives? How did you choose how you built a narrative? And I just would love to hear some of your thoughts of how you were reflecting back on what story you were telling as well.
Well, in the process of making this film, it shifted so many times because it was an evolving story, and I had no idea where it was taking us at many times. In the first year, when the controversy first broke out, I thought the focus was going to be more about gender and human rights and political correctness. And then after Jordan's book came out especially, it became more about he was having this huge impact on people. There's, the effect that he was having on young men. There were so many different issues happening. But then it was also, the thing that was consistent was that whenever I would talk to people about making a film about Jordan Peterson, the number one question is, okay, so whose side are you on? Is it pro or anti? And is Jordan good or is he bad? It's like that's the underlying question that was always kind of underneath it. And when it came down to editing the film, when we finally stopped shooting or mostly stopped shooting, I realized I shot sort of 3 different films, and I realized how hyper-focused I had to become in order to edit a cohesive story. So we edited the footage into different scenes and saw, which ones stood out the most, which ones were the most powerful, which ones were cohesive, and just kind of kept whittling down from there. But throughout that whole process of writing and rewriting the story, it became clear that although it's a balance between the film being about Jordan and the issues, it's ultimately more so about Jordan and this really intimate look at how things evolved for him throughout this period of his life.
and I think it's so wonderful that your guys' original interactions with Jordan wasn't reacting and responding to like the moment. It was you guys were already starting to work with him in the first place, and it really shows in that this doesn't feel like a fluff piece or a hate piece for sure. It's really special. Let's do one more over here, and we'll switch back. Yeah, Stephen, you have.
First, I wanted to say thank you very much for the wonderful film. I especially appreciated seeing the inside of his home because I thought that the picture was worth 1,000 words. And what I wanted to comment on was something you said about your background specifically, and about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, because it's something that has frustrated me, and that is that Jordan is not anti-gay or anti-women. You know, I've heard him talk on helping people in those situations. But clearly the film expressed that triggering point where Jordan, in C-16, it was about the bill and the requirement by law and being convicted of a felony for failure to use the proper pronoun of the person that triggered him. But it seems like they were talking at odds with each other. In other words, that the transgender and gay activists that were up there, there was no understanding that he wasn't coming against them as a person. And yet that was clearly what the film showed. So I wanted to thank you for that, because I had never really seen the triggering to the extent that it was. I don't know if I'm making any sense. In other words, what I'm trying to say is they were talking at each other, but not comprehending what the other was saying. Because I don't think Jordan ever intended to be against any particular person, and really was helpful of people in different situations. So.
There was a couple over here, and we need to make sure we get the middle too. Sorry, guys. The center is where it's at. You know?
Hey, I don't know if this is really a question so much, but it may lead to a question. I think, I mean, you see it in his house. Jordan started with studying the history of totalitarianism in the 20th century, and was very much moved by seeing the Titan II Missile Museum in Arizona, where a missile, a 9-megaton warhead, which could destroy 900 square miles, was located, all right? And he wondered, how did we get to this point? In terms of his thinking, clearly he would say, I'm a British liberal. He's an opponent to all forms of totalitarianism, but he chose not to go into politics, so he started out as a democratic socialist in Canada. He didn't think that was the deep enough level of analysis, and so he chose to go into psychology and do what he did. So I think the question, because you've met the man, and I've just read about him and watched him, is how do you think his choosing to go into psychology and philosophy is getting at those deeper issues and the issues of dialogue and the deeper issues that we need to dialogue on, rather than being involved in politics? But because there's so much political polarization, it's like, you know, well, did you like him or didn't you like him? Is he good or is he bad? You know, he's actually trying to get at something so much deeper, issues so much deeper than politics, that's really his mission in life, I think. I don't know if you agree with that, but my take on him is the man chose to be a clinical psychologist to help people, and he wanted to get at how did we get to that point, you know, with the Cold War.
That's good.
So.
Yeah. And you guys had a line in there where I actually hadn't caught it, but yeah, and originally like screening this, but he had this line where he said something like, I'm caught up in the political and I basically can't help it, but he thinks that the political is trying to solve psychological problems, right? And so, yeah, would you guys, your experience of Jordan, has it been that he's like the reluctant leader in some of these things, or how is he getting so embroiled in this stuff?
It was important for me to show in the film a bit of a conflict between the two because I agree that ultimately Jordan has decided philosophy, psychology, that's the best realm where he can help people. But he's explored the idea of getting involved in politics many times in his life, starting from the age of 14. And even in the last few years, many people were telling him, well, can you run for prime minister, as he was getting more and more popular. But he continues to come to the same conclusion that it's not really the best realm to help people because he has to, it's best to go to a deeper level. And so in the film, there are a few different points of showing this tension where he talks about how he's in a place where he's kind of stepped outside of just being in the philosophical realm, but he felt that he had no choice, so he's in the political realm, but then there's the danger of, him being part of that political battle, and he is now part of that political battle. So I think there's an ongoing tension. I don't know if he'll ever be able to go back to just being purely in the philosophical, psychological realm now that he's gotten so involved in this way, and maybe he doesn't want that. Maybe he needs to find what that balance is.
I'm sorry, I didn't answer a follow-up question. It's just that I seem to think that because he believes so passionately, as a liberal, that you need dialogue to get at the truth, that's absolutely essential, is you need dialogue. And consequently, he feels maybe compelled because the left is so strong in university campuses, and they don't believe in freedom of speech, and they use physical intimidation, and they shout people down. And so my interpretation of him, because I know he's truly dedicated to liberal principles of freedom of speech, press, association, respecting the other person, letting them express their views, having dialogue, is that he feels almost forced at this point to go into the political realm if those things are going to survive. So, yeah.
Let's get a handful in the middle. We've kind of, my bad, I overlooked you guys.
Thank you. So you were talking about, the debates about the questions you get asked, pro or con. Mm-hmm. But what strikes me is that the whole debate started over the issue of, are you allowed to have a debate? And it's easy to lose track of that, and I appreciated that the film showed that. But what I wanted to ask is, because so much of this does get mischaracterized, it's like, well, do you disagree with Jordan Peterson's ideas or not? But what he's actually trying to do is get the dialogue beyond that to, but are we allowed to have a conversation? You've had events canceled. Mm-hmm. Even the activist you spoke to at the end of the film said you shouldn't have made this film about Jordan Peterson. So my question is, I would like to hear personally from you what your experiences of that backlash have been, of the idea that you are not allowed to ask these questions or make this film.
Good question.
Well, it's certainly ironic that here we are, having delved into this topic for 4 years, and now we've come to our theatrical release of the film, which was always very important for us because we wanted to be able to have dialogues like this and really get that face-to-face feedback as people watch the film, because we think it's such a conversation starter. And we faced a lot of barriers in the theatrical world with mainstream and art house cinemas. We've had 3 cancellations, and we've also we hired a booking manager that's been working with us for a few months to help us plan our theatrical release strategy. And no is the expected answer in this industry, but the kinds of no's we were getting, he felt were not the typical no's, and he's very experienced in this industry, so I trust his opinion on the matter. So, but it is ironic for us to have delved into this topic for 4 years, and then for us to sort of be in a position where we're experiencing some of that too. And, on the one hand, there's some people that say, oh, well, it's good that this is happening because you'll be able to get press. And it's true that, when we're reaching out to news media, they're more interested when a cancellation happens. They're more likely to pick up the story, which is unfortunate, but it's a reality. But it's also pretty boring for us, I think. Like, we worked really hard to frame this film in a way that we hoped would transcend that kind of polarized conversation. So we were hoping to have different kinds of conversations and not come out with, here's our film and it's not being shown and they're being ideological. Like, it's a bit of a boring narrative for us. I've been having a lot of conversations with other documentary filmmakers and colleagues, and there's some pushback there. Also, with media coming out telling the story about how we've had cancellations, etc. There are people who are questioning our own bias as filmmakers, saying, well, if you're adopting the same narrative as Jordan Peterson, then how can you be unbiased in your own filmmaking? And I understand where they're coming from, but when we're sitting there in Brooklyn at 11 p.m. getting our email that our screening that was supposed to happen the next day was canceled, it's like you can't just dismiss that as a narrative, like it happened for real.
Yeah, like, do you remember the Democratic debates? I think it was not the last one, the one before, and they kept talking about, it's a right-wing talking point, it's a right-wing talking point. They kept saying that. When this stuff happened to us, we didn't make it up, and we didn't exaggerate what happened. We know what happened. We have the emails sitting right there. But people in the industry, and I guess some even friends on Facebook, just kind of think, you're exaggerating this cancel culture. That's just what right-wingers say to put down the left. And that's partly true. I mean, one side always wants to make, like the whole anti-SJW tribe, I mean, they live for making when liberals do something stupid, they make a video out of that. And Russia, Russia Today, they gave us a 22-minute video interview, and the questions were always the same, right back to, cancel culture, and why are they doing this to Jordan Peterson, and all these things. We know exactly what they're interested in, and what they're interested in is that when the West misbehaves, the East pays close attention with a microscope and a megaphone, So, and vice versa. So what the other tribe is always interested in is look how great they're not doing, and comparatively speaking, look how well we're doing. So people just kind of lumped us up with these types of characters because those are the ones that reached out to us. But all we can control is what we say and what our quotes are. And we're very careful when we did an interview because we know exactly what they want. So we spoke to common humanity, we spoke to, not being reactive, being proactive, doing events like this, indie events, and cinema on demand where people can host their own screenings. People just kind of lumped us up with the worst and most deceptive part of the other side of the spectrum. And that's a shame, because what actually happened did happen. We got shows canceled in a pretty last-minute way for reasons that, one of them, they hadn't seen we sent the film to them, they didn't watch it, they cited that their staff felt unsafe. You guys just saw the film. This isn't an anti-left propaganda film. It talks about what happened, and Lane is in there. Lane is even in the last part, and you usually don't do that. You usually don't bring in supporting characters so late, but we want to say, that opinion is huge in their community, and we want to put that in. A lot of them feel that way. It's like, if you were going to make a documentary, you should talk about the marginalized communities, and social justice is huge in this industry, in arts and film, and that's appropriate to a degree, but the film that we set out to do before all this political stuff happened was a film about Jordan. So we stayed true to that, and I think we gave a lot of space, as much as we could, to the other voices, but also that's what made the story interesting. Like the conflict in somebody who wants to watch a film about, I think a lot of people want to watch a film about their hero, but the kind of film we want to watch is the kind of film that we made, which is more about the conflict who is this guy, you know? Because I love this idea of kind of like the confused soldier, right? There's this culture war, right? And to have war, you can't have a war without soldiers. And you can't be a soldier if you're confused. You're not gonna put that vest on and go in the field. If you're confused, you're like, I don't know what to pick. Maybe I'll just sit this one out. And you just don't show up. And so much of what I realized when I'm talking to individual people is that so much of this culture was just kind of made up. We have differences of opinion, but they're exaggerated, and it has a lot to do with technology, because you don't experience the other side usually. You experience their feed and their hyperbolic headlines. That's all people read, and not the actual content of the article. So it's been very enlightening, this stuff.
And I could just add and pull a lot of what you guys have been going through, and a lot of these news interviews and all the rest, and bring it down to the practical for us in the room, is that in your conversations with people, genuinely pay attention. Obviously, that's a good thing, right? But beyond that, pay attention to how they're asking their questions, because you can differentiate pretty quickly between an inquiry and an inquisition. And so many of the questions that these guys have been getting, if you watch the interviews or read some of the articles, there's an inquisition angle there. They're trying to ask, like, are you for us or against us? Are you for Jordan, against Jordan, etc.? That's not an inquiry. That's not like even the question from Bethany earlier who left. That was a genuine inquiry about how do you wrestle with your own bias trying to make a film that has a story, right? That was a genuine inquiry, but so much what you guys have been getting is inquisition, and pay attention in your own day-to-day life and differentiate that for people. It's fascinating what can happen if you can do that. Let's do another one in the middle, and then we'll move back over here.
Thank you for your film. I think it was well done. I think a lot of us who follow Jordan Peterson know that he's very well studied and a man who's got broad knowledge on a wide number of topics. And I think that a huge part of the rise of Jordan Peterson is, yes, the C-16, the Bill C-16 thing did shoot him kind of into the eye of the world, and everyone knows who he is. But so many people, I think, just became fascinated by who he is and the kind of thinker he is, and the way that he especially addresses, the power of archetypes and myth and story. And he specifically really goes into the Bible. I mean, he has hours and hours and hours of his discourse on his biblical analysis from a Jungian and kind of archetypical perspectives, looking at archetypes. And I think that has been probably garnered a large percentage of his following, people who just didn't consider faith or didn't consider these stories as being compelling or interesting, much less true. And I think that it's interesting that this aspect of him wasn't included in the story that you're showing. And I just wondered if that was on purpose, or if there was a reason why you didn't include that part of his story.
There are so many things that got cut from the film, and it's a really difficult process to see what or to let go of certain parts of the film. But we thought that I guess I would put it this way. I think when the C-16 controversy happened, that put him in the public eye. But if it was just that, his 15 minutes of fame would have ended a long time ago, right? There's this huge body of work that allows him to dig into these issues and touch people in a really deep way, and that's given him his staying power. So, there's the parts of the film where we show the young boys going to his show, and a really emotional person at the end of one show talking about the ways that his work has deeply affected them. So we thought it was obviously very important to show that part of the story and in his rise and in what gave him that really important staying power that's put him into this level where he is this important intellectual figure. As for the Bible lecture specifically, I mean, we attended almost every single one of those, filming them. So one of the things Jordan said to me before he started that series was he thought, this might be the most important thing I ever do. And he's certainly right with his very first lectures. I think if it's not the most, it's one of the most popular videos on his YouTube channel. Ultimately, it came down to finding that balancing act between how much is this film about Jordan, how much is it about the ideas, and there's so many ideas and they're complex, and I guess I didn't want to try to bring in ideas that I couldn't address properly in the film if it's just going to be in a really kind of quick, superficial way. So that's the balance we landed on.
Yeah, the Bible lecture, that's a whole its own project that deserves its own series. So,
if you've enjoyed the Bible lectures, thank them though, because so much of it was because they filmed it. So, sorry, you had a specific
somebody
question.
asked if he's going to continue them.
Okay.
Yes,
He definitely wants to.
Totally.
Yeah,
that's going to happen.
Yeah, let's swing over here.
Wonderful film. I appreciate it. Thank you. The thing that I'm considering is that the resistance and controversy that he's getting is nothing new. This has been going on for centuries. This is a part of the human condition. And because of his background, I'm sure that he's been prepared to deal with this, just like anybody that would study political science and went into a campaign. Can you tell me about the strategies that he's done to be able to, create and capitalize on what's happening?
Well, when Jordan first released the video, I think it was definitely a huge surprise the way that it panned out. I think he was hoping to start a conversation. I don't think he expected, the rallies and the extreme amount of backlash that he got. I think it was a lot of then just kind of reacting in the moment and figuring things out with a lot of his family. His family is number one, and they helped him a lot with, getting opinions from his kids and his wife, like, how do I continue with this? He also would talk a lot with respected colleagues and friends who would give him feedback about how he was doing when he was presenting himself, how he was talking about ideas and articulating them. So he would look to their opinions a lot. And, there's the part of the film where he said on the Joe Rogan podcast, he figured out how to monetize social justice warriors. So in terms of capitalizing on it, there was that. But yeah, it definitely wasn't a premeditated master plan of how to strategically go through this. It was like that happened. He was interested in YouTube and the value of YouTube for a while leading up to this. So I think that's why he chose that platform, but it was a lot of learning along the way, really.
Yeah, and I feel like he's oftentimes described it as like he's riding a wave and he doesn't know exactly when it's going to stop, and he's more or less along for the ride. And so he is figuring a lot of this out along the way, right? Yeah. Let's do a couple more, and then I want to respect folks' time. So we had, one over here, and then we'll do one more over here, and we'll kind of wrap up conversation in the lobby.
One of the things tiny little snippets of what he said that affected me the most was when he spoke to the young boy and he said, "And be gentle." And I've heard that in the way he talks. And so I was wondering, and I was longing for, at the end of the film, thinking, well, maybe he and Lane finally talk to each other. Maybe he could gently, and I wanted to know if that ever happened. I wanted to know if, like outside of the film, or if there, anyway, I was just, I was wanting him to like heal that relationship and touch that boy, in a way that I felt like he's capable of maybe, but.
So two things. Okay, so about Lane. So Lane, that's all right. So Lane came over to see, so we did a TV cut. It's for CBC, came out in November, and Lane and a friend came over to our place to watch the film. And, we were nervous there because fundamentally, like, it's a Jordan Peterson documentary. But
Lane knew that going
Lane
into
knew
it.
that,
We made
yeah.
sure Lane knew that.
Yeah, for sure. And it was always a negotiation. You know, when you have access to somebody to be in their film, you have to continue to work on that access. You don't just, they sign the consent and no, done. They can walk away. So it was always conversations with Lane because we knew that perspective is so important. Without that, I think that's what adds that kind of, it takes the footing off of, for me, it takes the footing off of any kind of righteousness that the film could end up having. But with Lane, yeah, so they came over to watch the film, and the first thing they said was, do you think Jordan would have a beer with me? The reason being, well, it was one of the first times I think Lane actually heard Jordan speak in his own words about what he thinks and what he doesn't think. So if you remember in the first act, there's that video of Jordan saying there's a protest called a trans teach-in, and so you know I don't disbelieve in the existence of non-binary people. Do you want me to say that again? Nobody watched that video. It's just not a video that people watched because it didn't matter. I mean, when you have this is true for both sides. If you have something to fight against. Like, we got these threats from these kids, you know, and looking at their Facebook, it's, you know, you're born in like '94, you know, what's going on? I remember being, I'm getting older now. I remember being alive, and I remember, you know, watching Ninja Turtles. But you know what they need is they need that cosmic battle. They need that enemy to fight against that gives them meaning. So it's down to meaning again. But that's much more of a sugar high. But yeah, so Lane said that, and I thought it was very. I thought that part of the job of the film is to educate and kind of know somebody's arguments better and what they are and what they aren't. So that's my thoughts on that. And the second thing about that kid that's in the film that's talking about the neo-Marxist history teacher. Every time I see that, I think, buddy, tell me what a neo-Marxist is, my friend. My 17-year-old friend, tell me what that means. Okay, like, what is the history teacher talking about? I don't know, I'm just guessing, colonialism or some crappy parts of Western history that we've come to terms with and are working through, or something that made you feel weird or something. So then what do? You buddy up with your buddies and you try to call them out, and is that speech? No, you have to engage, and you can write your paper or whatever you need to do but you know. So I thought that was a bit Ben Shapiro-ish, right? Like, and it's fun. Like if you're on the subway and some feminist makes you feel weird, turn on a Ben Shapiro video, you'll feel better, you know. So it's this kind of anti-left stuff, and it's just as bad as the anti-white too. There's that too, kind of in like contemporary culture. It's like pretty popular, especially in arts. But you know, the thing that I hope the kid heard more than anything is when Jordan says exactly that: be gentle. So, and the way he says it, you really got to watch it again. You know, the way he says what he says in front of all those people, he's like, it's kind of like saying, okay, I'm going to say something. Do you guys like this? Oh, they liked it. Okay, more. I'm going to, you like Jordan talks about, the audience tells you what to say, and you want to be part of that, and you want to be cool and badass. But remember the last thing Jordan said, be gentle. So that's my thoughts on that kid.
That's really good. Let's do one more over here, and again, I want to respect folks' time. We can continue to peel out if you need to, but we can continue a lot of this conversation in the lobby as well. So let's do one more over here, and then we'll break.
So my question is actually about continuing conversations. I'm the current organizer for the Jordan Peterson meetup in Portland, and it has been a very interesting experience. The first meeting I went to, a man came in, and he wasn't planning to stay, but he just made a comment like, I just wanted to see what kind of people would do this in Portland, and then ran out of the coffee shop. So we've had a very wide, very interesting group of people, some that stay longer, some that stay shorter. But the overlying, it's still somewhat of a polarizing, I hate to use that word because it's kind of trite right now, but I would imagine that this desire to continue these conversations and to speak freely is, prevalent all over because he's inspired this spark in people. So I guess my question is, how might you, based on your experience with the film, advise that we continue to facilitate this in a gentle way? And also there's a fellow meetup organizer here. We've both commented that some of our participants are fearful to attend the meetings. They don't feel comfortable speaking, especially in public. So, thank you.
I would say that in the first couple of years while I was working on this film, I was very nervous to talk about what I was working on in certain circles. And I mean, a lot of our colleagues and friends are very much left of center. We consider ourselves left of center. The arts world, the documentary world is very much on that side. So it's been very anxiety provoking for me. But at the same time, I was very committed to the project. It was never an option or a consideration on any level to walk away from it. So I guess I would say to those people who are nervous about it, I think the most that they could do is to be honest with themselves and with other people. And it doesn't mean you have to be forthright in every circumstance, choose your battles. But, state what you have to say and what your opinion is in the right moments of at least showing where that nuance is of, I agree with this, but I disagree with this, to at least show yourself in those spaces so you have that integrity. And if you have that integrity, then you have enough confidence and foundation to move through any kind of social conflicts that will come your way, because you're doing it with integrity. You're not trying to please anyone and moving beyond what you actually think. So I think for me, that's been the most important thing to give me the foundation to push through to get to this place.
Yeah, and I'll add, this is a point, even though at times he can maybe play the Ben Shapiro card himself a little bit, but Dave Rubin makes often. And he says that what exists in America right now is there's polarization, there's all these things, but there seems to be like this bravery epidemic that's happening. People seem just raptured, and they get the analysis paralysis because they hear all this negative noise, and they're like, oh, I just can't engage, and fear kind of grabs them and holds them. But there is a very large, very, very large, larger than any of the tribes, silent majority that exists. And it just takes a handful of brave people meeting in coffee shops or meeting in spaces and places and having a conversation and dialogue about difficult topics, ideas, or people. And it does require some bravery, a little bit of sacrifice and difficulty, but it's certainly worth it. We had a number of threats about this event in and of itself tonight. And we took all the proper security precautions and everything to ease your minds. But the choice was we could cancel it based on these threats and refund you all of your money, or we have a conversation and talk and watch a movie, like goodness sakes. And you guys all want to do that. So we did it. And look, it was awesome. And so at the end of the day, it's hard, but practice some bravery, and you're already doing that. So thank you for doing that. So let's go ahead and, so let's go ahead. Let's continue the conversation in the lobby, but Jeremy was so kind to remind me, we have posters for sale. We had these posters kind of canvassed around town. Maz had said earlier, like, you can get yours before Antifa takes it down off of the wall.
You took my joke.
No, I gave you credit.
Yeah.
You wanted it.
That's even worse.
You had a microphone, man.
You're buying
you
a poster.
Cut me off. I'll buy a poster.
Now.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But we have them for sale out in the lobby. It's just a fun memento from this night where you practice
and we
some
can sign it. We got some
conversation.
silver marker.
Yes, I love it. So thank you again for coming. Enjoy the evening and further conversation. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.